In the distant future, humanity had spread across the galaxy like seeds carried on the wind, planting colonies on distant worlds and establishing vast networks of trade and knowledge. From the icy plains of Harva to the sprawling jungles of Talia, Prime, humans had made their mark. But with the wonders of exploration came a deadly reality. As human colonies expanded, they attracted the attention of darker forces. Alien species, far more advanced than anything humanity had encountered, saw the humans as a threat to their control over the galaxy. Among these species were the Surthians, an enigmatic race whose intelligence and technology were years ahead of anything humanity could produce. They weren't just conquerors, they were hunters, and their goal was to eradicate the human race before it could become a power that rivaled their own. Earth, the cradle of humanity, was now under constant threat. The Protector, a massive starship, built from the combined efforts of the best minds and most skilled engineers humanity could offer, stood as the last line of defense against the looming alien menace. Unlike anything the Surthians had ever faced, the Protector was a marvel of human engineering, sleek, powerful, and armed with weapons capable of leveling entire fleets. Its hull, reinforced with alloys stronger than anything seen in the galaxy, could withstand the harshest of impacts. Inside, it housed cutting-edge technology, advanced AI systems, state-of-the-art weaponry, and defenses that could render any incoming assault meaningless. But it wasn't just the ship's size or power that made it humanity's final hope. It was the crew aboard, hand-picked from the brightest minds, each one dedicated to the survival of the human race. At the heart of this effort stood Captain Elena Harris, the Protector's commanding officer. She wasn't just a leader. She was a strategist whose mind could unravel any tactical problem and turn even the most impossible situations to humanity's advantage. Harris had seen the devastation brought by the Surthians firsthand. Her family had once lived on a distant colony before it was wiped out in a surprise attack. Now, with Earth on the line, she would not let history repeat itself. Her resolve was unbreakable. There were no second chances in this war, no room for error. Every decision she made could determine whether humanity survived or perished. The threat of the Surthians was no longer a distant whisper. Their fleet, led by an intelligence so cunning and vast, was closing in on Earth's solar system. They operated in the shadows, launching coordinated strikes that crippled human defenses at every turn. Their ships, sleek and terrifying, had decimated smaller colonies in mere hours, their weapons cutting through human ships as if they were made of paper. Intelligence gathered from surviving scouts painted a chilling picture. The Surthians were relentless. They didn't just want to conquer, they sought total annihilation of humanity, leaving no trace behind. The Protector was Earth's only defense, but the stakes were higher than ever. If the Surthians' next strike succeeded, Earth itself would fall. The crew of the Protector was a mix of veterans and fresh recruits, each one bound by the same mission: to protect their home at any cost. There were engineers who kept the ship's engines running, soldiers trained for combat in the depths of space, and scientists who studied alien technologies in hopes of finding weaknesses in their enemies. Yet despite the vast array of minds and talents, it was Harris who held them all together. Her ability to read people, to inspire them, was unmatched. She knew that fear was the enemy as much as the Surthians. While the crew faced the terrifying unknown, Harris remained a steady presence, her calm demeanor hiding the storm of thoughts running through her mind. Every time she walked into the command center, the crew knew that she wasn't just their captain, she was their shield, but the threat loomed larger every day. As the Protector's sensors scanned the stars, it became clear that the Surthians were gathering their forces, preparing for a strike like nothing humanity had ever seen. Harris gathered her top officers in the war room, her expression stern. She didn't need to say much. The gravity of the situation was understood by all. This was no longer a matter of winning a battle. This was about survival. As the star systems around them went dark, Humanity had only one hope left: the Protector. The ship was more than just a vessel. It was a symbol of everything humanity had fought for, and everything they were willing to sacrifice to survive. The clock was ticking. The first move would be critical. Harris knew the Scythians would not show mercy, and she had no illusions about the stakes. It would be a fight to the very end, and as the Protector prepared for its first confrontation with the Scythian fleet, one thing was clear: humanity would not go quietly into the night. No matter the cost, they would fight, and they would survive. The quiet hum of the Protector's engines echoed through the vastness of space as it drifted in orbit around Earth's closest moon. The crew had just finished their last sweep of the solar system, and for the first time in weeks, there was a rare sense of calm aboard the massive ship. Captain Elena Harris stood on the bridge, staring out at the dark expanse, but her mind was never at rest. She knew the Scythians were out there, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. The moment came faster than anyone anticipated. Message from deep space came in, its contents chilling. A human supply convoy carrying vital resources to a remote colony on the edge of known space had gone dark. No signals, no distress calls, just silence. The Protector was immediately dispatched, its powerful engines roaring to life as it sped toward the convoy's last known position. Harris stood firm at the helm, her mind racing. She knew this wasn't a random attack, it was a carefully calculated strike. The Scythians were making their move. As the Protector approached the convoy's coordinates, a sudden explosion tore through the silence of space. The convoy's lead ship, a cargo hauler, erupted in a flash of light as an unseen force struck it from the dark. The remaining ships in the convoy attempted to flee, but they were no match for the relentless pursuers that followed. A fleet of Scythian warships, sleek and menacing. In the blink of an eye, the convoy was surrounded. "This isn't just a raid," Harris muttered, her voice low and dangerous. "They're targeting us." The Protector moved swiftly into position, its weapons coming online with a low hum. At the same time, the ship's advanced AI, Sentinel, began analyzing the situation. "Captain, the Scythian fleet is significantly larger than anticipated," it reported in its calm, emotionless tone. "Their lead ship is equipped with a quantum disruptor. It will disable our systems if we engage directly." Harris cursed under her breath. The Protector's sensors were already showing signs of interference. The Scythians had deployed a weapon that could disrupt the very systems that kept the ship functioning. If they were not careful, the Protector would be just as vulnerable as the convoy. But Harris wasn't one to back down. "We've dealt with worse. We can't let them get away with this." "Adapting strategy," Sentinel replied, its voice unwavering. The AI's calculations were rapid as it guided the crew through a series of evasive maneuvers. The Protector dodged the Scythian onslaught, its engines firing at full power as the crew scrambled to outwit the alien threat. The battle was on. Harris quickly gave orders to her tactical officers, who worked in perfect synchronization, relying on old-fashioned military strategies to stay one step ahead. The Protector zigzagged through space, using asteroids and debris from the convoy as cover. They had no choice but to fight unconventional. While the Scythians relied on their superior firepower, the humans relied on their resourcefulness. The Protector's shields flared as a blast from a Scythian ship grazed the starboard side, but the crew was already working to repair the damage before the enemy could strike again. "We need to draw them out," Harris said, her eyes scanning the battle map on the screen. "Bring them close, then hit them with everything we've got." With Sentinel coordinating their movements, the Protector did just that. The humans' knowledge of combat was their advantage. The Protector feinted a retreat, drawing the Scythian ships deeper into the asteroid field, where their superior weapons couldn't get a clean shot. As the Scythians chased after them, Harris gave the order to deploy a series of surprise counterattacks, catching the aliens off guard. The Protector unleashed a volley of missiles, hitting the Scythian lead ship square in the hull. The quantum disruptor was momentarily disabled, giving the humans a brief window of opportunity. The battle raged on, and for every blow the Surthians landed, the crew of the Protector had a clever response. The humans didn't need to outgun their enemies. They just needed to be smarter. And as the Protector's weapons tore through the Surthian ships, it became clear that the aliens underestimated humanity's ingenuity. After a tense few minutes, the Surthian fleet began to retreat, their ships damaged and their once confident advance shattered. But as the last of the warships turned to flee, a chilling message crackled through the Protector's comms. "This is not over, humans. Your time is running out." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. Harris exhaled, her shoulders tense. "We've won this battle, but we know they'll be back. And next time, they'll come stronger." The Protector's crew had proven their worth. They had outsmarted a technologically superior enemy and saved the convoy, but the warning left by the Surthians was clear. The clock was ticking, and humanity was running out of time. As the Protector began to pull away from the wreckage, Harris stared out at the stars, knowing that this was only the beginning of a much larger war. The Surthians may have retreated for now, but the fight was far from over. And next time, they would not be caught off guard. The tension aboard the Protector had never been higher. After the narrow victory against the Surthians, the crew was on edge, aware that the true battle for humanity's survival was fast approaching. The ship's mission was clear. Earth was their last sanctuary, and the Protector was humanity's final line of defense. But as Captain Elena Harris stood on the bridge, watching the stars drift by, a feeling of unease gnawed at her. It wasn't just the approaching threat of the Surthians. It was something much closer to home. It started with a whisper, a rumor that quickly spiraled into something far more serious. Commander Marcus Ford, one of the Protector's most respected officers, had been acting strangely. He was a man of few words, always professional, but something about his demeanor had changed in the past few days. His decisions seemed off, his reports more distant. Then came the discovery: classified communications, encrypted messages sent from Ford's private terminal to an unknown source. The encryption was traced back to the Surthians. Harris couldn't believe it at first. Ford was one of the ship's most decorated officers. His tactical brilliance had saved countless lives in the past. The thought that he could be a traitor was unthinkable, but the evidence didn't lie. Ford had been in secret contact with the Surthians, and the messages suggested he was offering them a path to peace, a peace that came at the cost of humanity's survival. The betrayal was staggering. The discovery sent shockwaves through the Protector's crew. Commander Ford was brought before Harris in the ship's interrogation room, his face tense, his eyes avoiding contact. The man who had once been a trusted ally was now a potential enemy. Harris stood across from him, her mind racing with 1,000 thoughts. "Why, Marcus?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Ford looked up, his eyes filled with a mixture of regret and defiance. "The Surthians offer humanity a chance to evolve, to rise above the violence and chaos we've created. War is not the answer. We've fought for survival long enough. It's time to look forward, to cooperate with them." Harris's heart sank. She had always known that humanity's greatest strength was its unity, its unyielding will to survive. But Ford's words struck at the very core of her beliefs. Could he be right? Could the Surthians offer a future beyond war, one where humanity could exist in peace, at the cost of surrendering to their superiority? "You're a fool," Harris finally said, her voice tight with anger. "You've turned your back on everything we fought for. You've betrayed your own species." Ford's expression hardened. "You're wrong, Captain. Humanity can't keep fighting this way. We've reached the end of the line. The Surthians know it, and they've offered a way out. You should accept it." The silence between them was heavy. Harris could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on her. She had always trusted Ford, respected his expertise, but now she was faced with the painful truth. Not everyone aboard the Protector was on the same side. Ford's belief in the Scythians' vision, his willingness to betray humanity for the promise of peace, was a sharp reminder of the fragility of human nature. The crew was divided. Some believed Ford's intentions were misguided but noble, that perhaps humanity needed to consider all options. Others, like Lieutenant Ana Morales, a staunch believer in human resilience, argued that Ford's actions were treasonous, a dangerous compromise that could spell the end of everything they'd worked for. The ship's officers were forced to take sides, and soon, an undercurrent of distrust spread throughout the Protector. Harris had to make a choice, one that weighed heavily on her heart. Was Ford simply a misguided idealist, or was he a true traitor who had endangered humanity's future? Could there be a way to save him from his own beliefs, or was the cost of his betrayal too great? She called a meeting with her senior staff, laying the evidence before them. The decision was unanimous. Ford had to be removed from command. But even as Harris gave the order, part of her couldn't help but wonder if humanity was truly united in their cause. Was it possible that Ford's ideals were shared by others within the Protector's ranks? Could there be more hidden traitors lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to act? As Ford was taken into custody, Harris knew that the battle for Earth had just become more complicated. The war against the Scythians was no longer just a matter of defeating an alien enemy. It was a struggle to keep humanity itself from fracturing. And with the stakes so high, the line between friend and foe was becoming dangerously blurred. As the Protector prepared for its next move, Harris realized that the true cost of war was not just measured in the destruction of ships or the loss of life. It was measured in the trust that was lost between the very people who were supposed to fight together for the future of humanity. The calm that had once settled over the Protector was shattered as the first wave of reports came in. Human colonies across the galaxy were being torn apart. Coordinated strikes by the Scythians had obliterated entire settlements in a matter of hours. Communications were cut off, and any ships that attempted to escape were either destroyed or forced to flee into uncharted space. The situation was rapidly deteriorating, and Captain Elena Harris knew time was running out. Earth, humanity's final refuge, was now a target. The Protector's mission was no longer just about defense, it was about survival. The Protector was dispatched immediately, tasked with the most critical and dangerous mission yet: evacuate as many civilians as possible before the Scythians' relentless assault reached Earth. The ship's engines roared to life as Harris issued orders to prepare for an emergency evacuation of thousands, refugees from the ravaged colonies. Scientists, engineers, and children who represented the best of humanity's potential were now under the protection of the Protector. These people were the future of humanity, and it was up to Harris and her crew to get them to safety. But the road ahead was fraught with danger. The Protector sped toward the nearest colony, its course set through an asteroid field. But a massive space storm, one of the most treacherous known to humanity, stood in their way. The storm was an unpredictable labyrinth of plasma, electromagnetic fields, and rogue gravity wells, anything that could tear apart a ship in seconds. Harris knew the Protector wasn't built for this kind of turbulence, but she also knew that there was no other choice. They had to push through. The crew worked in unison, using every ounce of training and skill to navigate the storm. The ship shuddered as it entered the violent chaos, its systems struggling to maintain control against the tempest. Sentinel, the ship's AI, was pushed to its limits, its voice barely audible over the creaking hull. "Captain, we're losing power to the engines. The storm is destabilizing our shields." Harris gritted her teeth. The lives of thousands hung in the balance. "We're not stopping. Push forward, full throttle." The Protector cut through, the storm like a knife through cloth, but the damage was taking its toll. Shields flickered, and the ship groaned with every tremor. At the edge of the storm, a sight that would haunt Harris for the rest of her life came into view. What was left of the colony. The once bustling settlement was now a graveyard of shattered buildings and burning wreckage. There were survivors, but they were scattered and desperate, barely clinging to life. The evacuation process was chaotic but necessary. Shuttlecrafts launched from the Protector to retrieve the refugees, while the ship itself became a beacon of hope amidst the devastation. As the crew worked tirelessly to bring people aboard, Harris caught sight of a group of children, huddled together with their families, eyes wide with fear. She felt a pang in her heart as she realized how fragile their future was and how much they depended on the Protector. These children, these families, this was what they were fighting for. As the last of the refugees boarded, Harris gave the order to leave the colony behind, but just as they were about to jump to faster-than-light travel, a chilling signal cut through the comms. The Cirthian fleet was closing in fast. The Protector, battered and bruised from the storm, was no match for their overwhelming firepower. The battle for survival was far from over. The Protector turned its guns on the approaching Cirthian ships, unleashing every weapon at its disposal. Laser beams lit up the dark expanse of space as missiles streaked toward the enemy. The ship's crew, though exhausted, fought with everything they had. They could not afford to lose. The Cirthians retaliated with devastating precision, striking the Protector's port side with a massive blast that shook the entire ship. Sparks flew from the control panels as the hull groaned under the pressure. The damage was severe. An entire section of the ship was nearly destroyed, and the ship's engines were struggling to stay operational. "We've lost primary thrusters," shouted Lieutenant Morales, her voice rising over the chaos. "We're drifting!" Harris felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her, but there was no time to panic. "Stabilize the ship. Hold them off long enough for the refugees to escape." With the Protector heavily damaged, the crew fought with every ounce of strength they had left. They had no choice but to keep pushing, to protect the survivors, and give humanity one last chance. After a tense few minutes, the Cirthians, realizing they couldn't breach the Protector's defenses without more reinforcements, pulled back. The immediate danger had passed, but the cost was high. The Protector was heavily damaged, and the crew was exhausted. Still, they had succeeded. They had saved thousands. As the Protector limped back toward a safe zone, Harris stood on the bridge, looking at the exhausted faces of her crew. They had fought against impossible odds, but they had won, for now. "We've done it," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "We've saved them." But the war was far from over. The Cirthians would return, stronger than ever. And this battle, this sacrifice, was only the beginning. The Protector was limping through space, its once imposing form now battered and bruised from the grueling battles fought to protect humanity's future. Captain Elena Harris stood on the bridge, her eyes scanning the starry abyss as the ship continued its journey toward an uncertain destiny. Earth was now on the brink of invasion, and with the Cirthians closing in, hope seemed like a distant memory. But there was something humanity had kept hidden, something that could turn the tide of the war. A weapon, codenamed Eclipse, a weapon that could either save or doom them all. The idea of such a weapon had always been whispered in the halls of humanity's most secretive research facilities. Eclipse was conceived as the ultimate answer to the alien threat, a force so powerful that it could decimate entire fleets with a single strike. It had been designed by humanity's brightest minds, a collective of scientists, engineers, and military strategists who believed that if the worst ever happened, Eclipse would be their last hope. But what was its true power? No one knew for sure. Its creators had kept its details shrouded in secrecy, fearing that even the possibility of its existence would lead to chaos. Now, as Harris stared at the coordinates on the screen, she felt the weight of that uncertainty pressing down on her. The weapon was located on a remote station deep in uncharted space, far beyond the reach of the Scythians, but getting there wouldn't be easy. The Protector was already damaged, its systems strained and fragile. The Scythians were relentless, and every moment they spent moving closer to Eclipse was another moment the enemy could close in on Earth. There was no time to waste, but as the crew prepared for the perilous journey, doubts lingered in the air. The survivors of the colonies, those who had been saved from the Scythians' attacks, were still reeling from the destruction of their homes. Among them were refugees who had lost everything, families who had been torn apart, and some who had already begun to question the choices humanity had made. As Harris navigated the complex emotions of her crew and the civilians aboard the Protector, she couldn't help but hear the murmurs of dissent. Not all of the refugees, particularly the scientists and engineers, supported the decision to use Eclipse. "It's too dangerous," one of them said, his voice shaking as he addressed Harris. "We don't know what this weapon will do. What if it destroys us instead of saving us?" Another survivor, an older woman whose family had perished in the initial wave of Scythian attacks, looked at Harris with desperation. "How can you even consider using something like that? What does it say about us if we have to rely on a weapon that could wipe out everything we've ever known?" The moral dilemma weighed heavily on Harris. She understood their fear. She felt it herself. But she also knew that without Eclipse, humanity stood little chance of surviving the impending invasion. The Scythians were too powerful, their technology too advanced. Earth itself was now a target, and the only way to ensure humanity's survival might rest with a weapon capable of destroying the very forces that threatened them. "Captain, the Scythian fleet is closing in fast," reported Lieutenant Morales, her face grim as she monitored the ship's sensors. "We need to make a decision. The longer we wait, the less chance we have of reaching the weapon." Harris didn't answer immediately. Her eyes were locked on the holoscreen, where the countdown to their arrival at Eclipse ticked down steadily. She thought of the survivors they had saved, the children who had lost their homes, and the families who had entrusted their futures to her ship. But most of all, she thought of the future of humanity. They had fought so hard to survive, but could they survive at any cost? Could they risk using a weapon like Eclipse and still remain human? The Protector's crew was divided, and the tension was palpable. Some of her officers, like Lieutenant Commander Yara, were ready to use the weapon without hesitation. "It's our only shot, Captain," she argued. "We can't wait for the Scythians to make the first move. We have to strike first." But others, like Dr. Adrian Holt, the ship's lead scientist, were vehemently opposed. "A weapon like that doesn't just end the war, it could end us all. We don't know the consequences, Captain. Humanity's future is more than just survival. It's about what we become in the process." As the Protector continued its approach toward Eclipse, the weight of the decision began to consume Harris. She understood both sides of the argument. The weapon was the last hope, yes, but it could also be their undoing. Could humanity truly live with itself if it chose the path of destruction? Or was it better to gamble everything on a weapon they couldn't even fully understand? The closer they got to Eclipse, the more Harris felt the tension in her bones. She didn't have an answer. All she knew was that the future of humanity, its survival, its morality, its very soul, hung in the balance. As the Protector hurtled toward the weapon's location, Harris realized that whatever decision they made, there would be no going back. The Protector drifted silently in the cold expanse of space, its once proud frame now shattered and broken, its mission complete. The fight was over, and the Scythians, who had once threatened to wipe humanity from the stars, were no more. The Eclipse weapon had done its job, its immense power shattering the Scythian fleet in a devastating explosion. Earth, humanity's cradle, was safe, but at a tremendous cost. The Protector, humanity's last line of defense, was beyond repair, its crew scattered, and its captain, Captain Elena Harris, was left standing amid the wreckage, her heart heavy, with both relief and sorrow. The battle had been long, brutal, and unforgiving. Many lives had been lost, and the once vibrant crew of the Protector now lay in the stars, their sacrifices forever etched into the history of humanity's survival. The survivors, a small group of civilians, scientists, and engineers who had once fled the devastation of their colonies, now had the chance to rebuild. But they were not without scars. They had witnessed the destruction of everything they had ever known, and the loss of so many comrades who had fought with unwavering loyalty and bravery. In the days that followed, the survivors began the painstaking task of rebuilding. Earth cities, long abandoned during the war, were slowly brought back to life as the remnants of humanity began to plant the seeds of a new future. Children, who had once stared at the stars with fear in their eyes, now looked up with hope, knowing that their world would be restored. The task was monumental, and the losses would never be forgotten. The crew of the Protector, those who had given everything to protect them, were honored, their names forever inscribed in the annals of history. Captain Harris stood on the bridge of the Protector, staring out at the vast emptiness of space. The ship's systems were quiet now, its once thrumming engines no longer alive with energy. It was a ghost ship, a monument to sacrifice. And yet, as she gazed at the stars, Harris could not help but feel a deep sense of pride. Humanity had survived. They had not been crushed by the overwhelming power of the Surthians, nor had they been defeated by their own fears and doubts. No, it was something else, something far more enduring, that had carried them through. It wasn't the Eclipse weapon that had saved them, nor the Protector itself, nor the advanced technology that humanity had worked so hard to create. It was the human spirit. It was the will to protect one another. It was the refusal to give in, even when the odds were stacked impossibly high. As Harris stood in the silent wreckage of the ship, she realized that this was humanity's true strength. It wasn't their weapons or their ships. It was their hearts, their minds, and their unwavering determination to protect what mattered most. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the memories of her fallen comrades wash over her. Their faces, their voices, their sacrifices. They had done the impossible. They had held the line when all seemed lost. And now, in the quiet aftermath of the war, humanity had a chance to start anew. The survivors gathered in makeshift memorials on Earth, planting trees, building homes, and establishing new communities. There were moments of joy, children laughing, as they played in the streets of newly rebuilt cities, but also moments of deep reflection. They had survived, but they would never forget the price they had paid. The legacy of the Protector would live on in every rebuilt structure, in every life saved, and in every step humanity took toward healing. Captain Harris, now older and wiser from the experiences she had lived through, watched the world begin to heal. She stood by the grave of her closest friends, their names etched into the stone. She had once wondered if humanity was strong enough to face such a monumental challenge. Now, she knew the answer. It wasn't about strength in numbers, or even strength in technology. It was about strength in unity, in resilience, in the unbreakable will to protect each other. As long as that spirit lived, humanity would endure. But even as the survivors celebrated the end of one war, Harris knew that this was not the end of humanity's struggles. The universe was vast, and its dangers were many. New challenges would arise, new threats would emerge, and humanity would have to face them, just as they had faced the Surthians, with courage, with heart, and with a determination to survive. But for now, as Harris looked out at the stars, she saw not the darkness of destruction, but the light of hope. Hope for a future where humanity could continue to thrive, forever shaped by the sacrifices of those who had fought to protect it.